we could fly.
Welcome to this new season of the Have a Cup of Jahani podcast. So I want to title this new season that I'm embarking on with I'm growing. So this is going to be the season of growth. And that's what I'm going to share with you throughout the season. So I thank you for coming over here and sitting with me. And I hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. So on this episode, I am going to try really hard to not turn this into a recruiting episode. Because I'll be explaining some of my Army story and how that collides with my creative story as well. And I think I tend to, not just on this podcast, but on all social media, to separate both and tend to only really talk about my creative pursuits. And I do that consciously because I want to separate them. Just like I said, I don't want to have undue influence or give the perception as if I'm the spokesperson for the Army, which I'm not. I'm just Johnny talking about my experience. Saying that, are you all ready to talk about my double duty as a soldier as well as an author? I think you are. All right, so let's get it then. Okay, so I did a thing last week, and this occurred because someone in my unit from the S1, y'all S1 folks are so kind. And S1, by the way, if you don't know, those are basically our HR folks, and those are the folks that ensure that our paperwork, our pay, and things of that nature are on track. They're a very big asset. Okay, let's just say it that way. They're a very big asset to us, and some of the best folks I have met in the Army have come from that specialty. I don't know what it is. I think it's because they're more administrative than anything else. And that was the highest score that I received as well when I did my ASVAB. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a technical or a mechanical person. I've always been more of a clerical person. And I have the scores to prove it. Okay. But saying that, so this S1 person, she recommended me to the Army marketing team. And yes, there is a whole Army marketing team that gets our story, our collective story, and deals with commercials and things like that. So that way other people know about it and know about the Army. And she recommended me after finding out my story, which if you go through my podcast episodes, you're going to know a lot about my story. But the thing is that a lot of people in the Army don't know the full scope of my story. And it is something that I've been trying to work on, to share it a little bit more, because I explained it this way. I said, when somebody asked me why I don't do it, I was like, I'm not the first immigrant to overcome hurdles and get to significant place in my life. I'm not the first single mom either to have to fight my way through the ranks in the Army as a single mom and then thrive doing it. I'm not really the first to overcome these obstacles. So I don't see this as something that is out of the norm. I see it as something that I was faced with and I had to deal with and jump over that hurdle, if you may. And I did just that because in the situation I was in, it was either that or I go back to where I came from, which for me, I didn't give myself that choice. It was, I had to overcome it. I had to win. So I didn't think it was out of the norm because in my circles, right, there's other folks just like me that are doing the same thing and sometimes better. So that's why this person, when I said that, they were like, yeah, but they're not you. Your story is particular to you. And that kind of stayed with me. But if you know me, you know that I am a stubborn person and I just, put my head down and keep moving forward. But eventually me trying to coach somebody along, snippets of the story came out, and then this S1 person found out about it. Because like I do here, right, when I try to help people, I do it in a storytelling mode that I pray, I hope that it doesn't come out as narcissistic, because I do it that way. I put myself in storytelling mode and explain a story that has a similar circumstance as that person, so that way that person can potentially see themselves in it, and potentially either see the way that I was able to overcome a particular situation, or they may get creative and use my experience to tailor it to their situation and their struggle. So that's why I do it that way, because I want to eliminate the preachiness from the whole situation, because I've noted that when I get preachy and I go, you need to do this, you need to do that, then I get the glazed look. I understand that they have stopped listening to me when that happens. I'm very observant when I'm talking to people, because I just want to make sure that they're understanding what I'm saying. And it's just from trauma before being ignored, right? That I'm very sensitive when it comes to that. So I'm very observant. And then I've noted that, right? That when people give me that look, that means that they're not listening. And if they're not listening, that means that they're not going to understand everything that I'm telling them. And then things may falter after that. So because of that, I have tailored the way that I give advice to lean more into something that I'm good at, which is storytelling. And this is why I do the podcast, and how I do the podcast is through storytelling. So this S1 person heard snippets, and she sends me an email. She's like, "Sorry, Major, I think you'll be the perfect candidate, to tell your Army story." Because the marketing team, right, they kind of like looking within the ranks and getting different perspectives from different soldiers, so that way people that are not part of this world understand this world in a more holistic way, in a more genuine way, actually, because from what I found out, there's a lot of myths out there about the Army. So it took me a little bit, right? I saw that email. I'm not going to lie, I didn't respond right away. It took me a few days. I kept looking at it, thinking that maybe I'll see something that I didn't see it at first that will prompt me to say no, no, I'm really busy. No, I need to do this instead. And then at the end of the day, I asked my officer counterpart, and he was like, "Do it." I was like, Jesus. I thought he was going to say, "No, you're really busy. You got to do this instead." So it kind of, it pushed me, that one little nudge pushed me to do it. And then long and behold, I said yes. And then from that came an interview that was published in Bustle. And from that interview came the radio interviews. It was a whole 18, right? It was a whole set, 18 total radio interviews from like 7 something in the morning on the East Coast all the way to 12 something in the afternoon. And that is what I'm going to tell you all about. So the focus of those interviews was how I balance my life between being a soldier, right, and being a creative person, and being fruitful in both. To like, I just published Mrs. Franchi's Evil Ring. I'm doing this podcast, and editing my second full length novel, while I already published like 3 or 4 short stories and 1 novella. So they found it, when the folks at the marketing command heard that, they found it fascinating. And really, for me, like I said, it's not really that fascinating. And it's not something that I think about it too much. I really look at my day to day as something that I do, and something that I assess, and something that I try to get better at each and every day. How can I get better at lifing? How can I get better at this? And that's how I have evolved into where I am today, and how I will continue to do so, because each day I look at it as an opportunity to refine a process, to refine my life, to get better. And when I say better, I want to be careful that people don't think that I'm talking about this hustling, this grind, and all of that. I do that. And I did focus on that a lot in my 20s. But I have found as I have gotten older and wiser that that is not sustainable. And I have found that me getting better means me understanding how I'm gonna embark on a day that gives me rest, that gives me joy, and that challenges me. So those three things I want to have in my day, right? I want to be challenged. I want to learn something new on that day. I want to be able to find peace even when there's chaos. So I'm constantly working on breathing, on meditation, on things that can center me, right? I'm constantly looking for those joyful moments that I can just exploit and laugh so hard that it ricochets the freaking walls of the building, right? So I'm looking for those three things. And some days are better than others. Some days I don't find peace, but I get up the next day to try to look for it again. So that's how I get better each and every day. Okay, so I just want to make sure that we all know that. But yeah, so this radio tour with the Army it was an unforgettable experience. It was just exhilarating. I couldn't believe it. I had some doubts of whether I can do it, but then, using that resiliency training that the Army taught me, I was like, I did that real time resilience. If you know, right? And I talked myself into finding proof of where I had overcome odds just like this, such as in military interviews, right? So if you don't know, for us to get promoted, if you're an enlisted person and you want to get promoted into the NCO ranks, which is the managerial leadership ranks, you need to go to a board, to an in-person board where you are sitting in front of a panel of members of sergeant majors and first sergeants, and they're asking you all these questions that have to do with doctrine, Army doctrine, as well as sometimes situational questions. And they do that to test your knowledge and to test your potential at becoming a leader in the United States Army. So, and I have done that a few times already. And I always get nervous when the spotlight is on me. Always, always, always. I don't think that will ever get out of me. And those interviews, those boards were no different. But I overcame, right? This was the proof that I gave myself. I overcame those. With each question, I got a little bit more comfortable. I got better. The tremble in my voice eventually went away. And then I was able to find my footing per se underneath me and really close it out with a bang. So that was a proof that I gave myself. And I told myself this will be no different. And if anything, it will be better because you don't have to be in your fancy uniform. When we go to boards, we have to be in that fancy uniform, right? I was like, you won't have to be in that uniform, Johnny. You won't have to be all uncomfortable sitting at the position of attention. Who knows what that is? And it seemed like a robot, but talk in a conversational and respectful way. I wouldn't have to do that. This will be a little bit more laid back for me. So that was my proof. I was like, if you can do that, right, you definitely can do this. So that's how I went in there. And I had so much fun. But the burning question from this entire 18 radio station tour was, how do you find the time? It was the one thing that they may have rephrased it, but it was always the thing that came up. How do you find the time? How do you balance it? I thought the Army takes all of your time and all of this, Let me explain something. The Army it is and it is not a 9 to 5 gig, right? So soldiers have as much free time in certain instances, right? Don't come for me, as our civilian counterparts. So let me explain. So I'm not talking about when we deploy, right? That's given. That is just right. That is your sole mission, or when we're training for those deployments. These are very particular things that occur in the life of a soldier in a unit where they can expect the entirety of their time to be utilized in training for their mission set, whatever that is. Each mission has different ones, and then to deploying and exercising those things live, right? And sometimes in an austere environment. So in those instances, no, we're not just like our civilian counterparts. But when we're back here and when we're not doing any of those things, right? When we are with our regular unit in a military base, that is not necessarily the thing. Your entire time is not necessarily taken. And the way that I have kind of like exploited the free bits of time that I have is by always being prepared. So I would write down, right, everything that I wanted to achieve. And if you haven't read the bullet journal method and the 12-week year, I suggest you read it. I did a podcast episode on that as well. Go read it. Go read it. I think it's also an audiobook. Yeah, because that's how I listened to it, and then I read those books. That's how important they are to me. And learn what it has there. Because from the bullet journal, I learned to write everything down and to write it all in one notebook that is organized in a way that you can find things, right? And not to write, like I used to write in different papers, or I used to have different notebooks for different things, which will then get confusing and really hard to track down. Now I just have one notebook that I call this is my bullet journal. And right now for the year of 2023, I'm already on B. Usually I go through two. Yeah, I haven't gone through three yet. Usually I go through two. And I write everything down. And usually what I do is I have a weekly log, which I call, and in there I have all the things that I want to get after on each day with time slots, right? So I do time slots a lot. From this time to this time, I'm going to be looking at this. From this time to this time, I'm going to be looking at this, right? And on the weekends, I do the same thing, but I tailor my weekends differently. I tailor my weekends with my creative projects in there. And then I slot them usually early in the morning when I know that my husband is still going to be asleep. So that way I don't take time from our schedule on those days that I cannot do that, right? Let's say like I had an event the night before where I stayed late. I know that I'm not going to want to wake up early the next day because I will want to recover. And if I don't recover, I will get grumpy. I know that about myself. Okay. So also this takes one person to really understand who they are and what works for them. Okay. So take that as well with you. So I know that about myself. So then when on the schedule, I have an event that is a late event, I give myself a little bit more time in the morning to drink my water, to do a bit of silent meditation time, to then take my vitamins, and then to start my day. You see, so all these things I have pre-planned already. And now I am recording my podcast episodes for the month of November, and I may even get after December, depending on how the schedule flushes out here in the next 2 weeks. But you see, so I'm able to get after this by writing things down and allocating a time for them. And I do most of these things early in the morning for two reasons. I have discovered that I am a morning person, therefore my brain is more productive and more vibrant in the mornings, not in the evenings. And then two, I know that my husband will be asleep. He's a slower morning person, so he won't really miss me. And when we have the additional children here, my step babies, they are that way as well. So they won't miss me because they'll be, slowly starting their morning while I'm already, up and going. So that's how I'm able to get after my creative pursuits while not taking away too much from family time and still having some of that family time. Now, not gonna lie, not everything is 50-50, right? Some weekends, depending on how things turned out on the week, means less family time or less of my creative pursuits. I do that way because I have assessed that I had no time during the Monday to Friday. Either I had a ton of meetings, certain things happen last minute, which they do happen. That happens in the Army life, that happens in the civilian sector as well. And it just took up too much of my time. And when that happens, I don't push myself late at night because once again, getting to know myself, I know that that will not be productive. I have tried that before, and that creates a counterproductive domino effect for me, in which then I am sleepy and groggy the next day because I didn't utilize my full rest, and then that just degrades everything after that. So that's why when my weekdays are taking up completely with either last minute things, right? Or a lot of back to back events, then I push all of my creative pursuits for the weekend, or then I push them further into the next week because what I do not take away from is my rest time. You see? So for me, that is my number one. And it may, some people may disagree, but for me, that's my number one. Like, you can tackle a lot of things on my schedule, right? The Army can tackle a lot of things on my schedule. Then I may have to push some of my creative and family things further into the other weeks. That will then add more to that schedule. But where I put a backstop on is my rest time. So I have a window where I go to sleep so that way I can get up early in the morning and perform those self-care tasks, which are meditate, peace and quiet time, learn something. I listen to my Noom pep talks and take my vitamins and drink my first 4 cups of water for the day. Those things don't go away. Those are like my non-negotiables, because that that block right there is what sets my day, what grounds me. You see, so that's how, in essence, I've been able to balance my time in the Army by really understanding my schedule, but also understanding how I can make this schedule flexible because there is some unpredictability there when it comes to certain things, which, like I said before, I don't think is unique to the Army. I think everybody has some sort of unpredictability in their schedule. So because of that, I'm able to achieve certain things, but it all boils down to understanding myself, how I can thrive, understanding my schedule, writing everything down. And I can't emphasize this enough, even even if it's like spend time with husband, right? Spend time with husband from 11 to 2. Write it down, and stick to it. And the reason why I say write it down is because if you, for whatever reason, do not get to it, right? Because this has happened to me. I write something like I'm going to look at soldiers' evaluations from 9 to 10. That's usually what I do on one of my time slots. And let's say this last minute meeting just dropped and then I can't do it, right? Then what I do is I write in there in my schedule the conflicting meeting that occurred, I check off the conflicting meeting. I leave the evaluation time slot unchecked. And then I know to look for another opening in my calendar to accomplish that. And it could be either an opening on that day, it could be an opening on another day, and that's where understanding my schedule comes into play as well. Because if I wrote it there, it's important to me. If I wrote it there, I need to accomplish it. So therefore, if it's not accomplished, I'm going to track it until it is. So that's why understanding my schedule has been so fruitful to me. And writing everything down has been so fruitful to me, because that's what keeps me checking off boxes, to say it in the most simplistic way. And so that way I can achieve everything that I want to achieve. And I do this for everything: personal, creative, army stuff. It has really helped me out a lot. So once again, if you are finding yourself like me, where you need to balance a lot of things, and you don't have to be in the army for this, it's just, moms need to balance things, right? Everybody will find themselves having to balance their lives in some way, shape, or form. And if you do that, if you take the time to understand yourself, if you take the time to write everything down, if you take the time to schedule your day, you will be able to find some clarity, and clarity will bring you peace. And then with that peace, you're able to do the things that you need to do to produce. And that is what has worked for me. I did say it was simple, but then me talking about it, and I tend to talk in circles, people. I don't know if you have noticed, but I do that because I find little pockets in the story where it reminds me of something else, and then I pull those out from those little pockets and then get back into the story. So that's kind of like my storytelling mode here. But I hope y'all enjoy something. And if you have any questions, I'm no expert. I'm not saying I'm an expert or anything like that, but I have found what works for me. And some days are better than others. Some days I accomplish what I set out to accomplish. The other days I do not. And I have to push that on another opening. And that's okay. I forgive myself. I continue to move forward, and off I go. So if you have any questions on any of this, or if you find yourself kind of stuck understanding how to get after the things that you want to get after, don't be shy. Send me an email. I am at joa@haveacupofjoanny.com. That is joa@haveacupofjoanny.com. And if you go to my social medias, you will see the email there, or you can go to the website and send a message through there as well. Okay. All right, folks. I hope that you learned something with this. I hope I didn't confuse you even more. And I will see you next Wednesday. Bye.
Oh, we could fly.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the show. See you on the next episode. Bye.
Oh, we could fly.